Hello, welcome to Fueling the Transition, the podcast series from A3 Management Consulting, where we consider decarbonisation, decentralisation and digitalisation and the impacts those will have on the energy sector. My name is Matt Brown. I'm Vice President in the Management Consulting Division at A3. In this episode, I'm very pleased to say we have two people from the Energy Systems Catapult, and we'll go on to explain a little bit about the Energy Systems Catapult in just a moment. But I've got George Day, who's Head of Markets, Policy and Regulation, and Sarah Key-Bright, who is Practice Manager in Markets, Policy and Regulation. Hello to you both.
Hi, Matt.
Hello.
We're also joined by my colleague, who's a director in the Oxford office at A3 Management Consulting, and that's Gareth Davis. Gareth has a long history as a recognised expert around the areas of regulation, policy, and market design in the energy sector. Hello, Gareth.
Afternoon, Matt.
So, for those who don't know so much about Energy Systems Catapult, I'll just give a brief introduction, and then I'll ask George maybe to fill in a little bit more about what a catapult is and the great work that's going on there. So in the Energy Systems Catapult, the mission is to unleash innovation and open new markets to capture clean growth opportunity. There are 200 innovation expert hubs in Birmingham and Derby. It is established, overseen and funded by Innovate UK, independent from the government. It's not for profit. And it's really meant to bridge the gap between stakeholders in the sectors. These catapults are really meant to be about whole system thinking and joining up the different silos that are sometimes split apart, putting it all together. That's across all parts of the value chain, from generation down to buildings, consumers, looking at not only electricity, but electricity, heat and transport. And of course, heat and transport are really where a lot of the big challenges are for us in the energy transition as we stand today. And then looking at the physical system, the digital system, the market and the policy, putting all of that together. So with that, perhaps, George, I can ask you a little bit more about some of the work that's going on in the Energy System Catapult.
Sure. We've got a whole range of different offerings, different work. We have different service platforms. So we support innovators, SMEs who are looking to get into the marketplace in various parts of the value chain in things like smart controls and low carbon buildings and so on. We've got a service platform called Modern Energy Partners, which is working with the public sector estate, looking at innovative solutions for low carbon energy in things like prisons and hospitals and public sector sites of various kinds. We've got an international platform which is working with a range of partners overseas. We have quite a bit of work in terms of modelling the energy system in various ways. A whole kind of suite of different modelling tools that we can use to look at the energy system at different scales, so looking at local energy transitions and what solutions might look like at a sort of town level all the way up to sort of national level. We also do a lot of work on consumer insights, so how a consumer is going to respond to new offerings, new ways of interacting with energy in their homes, smart charging of electric vehicles, that kind of thing. And then we've got a big emphasis on data and digitalization as well. So we worked, for example, did a lot of the work on the Energy Data Task Force, so looking at the issues around how do we open up data in the energy sector and really unlock some of the benefits for innovation of access to data and digital services and so on.
Thanks very much. And it seems to me that it's really important, especially the consumer end of it, the behavioural end of it, as we look forward, trying to really make use of all of the flexibility that's embedded in the electricity system, in the energy system, what consumers, how they'll engage, what they'll want in terms of their input, preferences and so on. How much of that is going to be coming from them? How much could be AI learning preferences over time? That's a really fascinating end of the market and a real potential constraint on delivering what we really want to deliver into the future. And I know we've been working together on a few projects over time, and all of them are really about rethinking electricity markets. In terms of those projects, where have those projects come from? Especially perhaps the most recent one, where we were looking in some detail at the electricity market design itself. So, if you could explain where those have come from, and then also perhaps put that in the context of what are the challenges that we face.
Yeah,
Why,
yeah.
why are these so important?
So I think our work on rethinking electricity markets has come from sort of inherited a number of directions from work we've done in the past, looking at particularly smart systems and heat, the challenges around decarbonizing buildings and homes, all the different kind of variety of challenges that you need to deal with in that context. So looking at the consumer aspects, of course, but also the building fabric aspects of that. So when we were doing this kind of work, and also looking at some of the national questions around the shape of the energy transition, we kept coming back to these issues around electricity markets and really trying to understand the role of zero carbon electricity as an energy vector. How do we get the right kind of incentives for the right mix of technologies to enable electricity to play that role in getting us to a low carbon, to a net zero future. We kept looking at a whole range of different challenges around that. We seem to keep circling around these issues about how does the electricity market work? How does it represent the value of things like flexibility and the value of different forms of generation or storage or demand side flexibility to the system as a whole. So we kept coming back to these issues. So we decided that it really made sense for us to do a project, a kind of thought leadership project, looking at the challenges, bringing that whole system perspective to bear on, how do you get the right set of market arrangements in place? And we were very conscious that there were a number of problems that we could see in the current market. So we looked, for example, at the way the current policies and mechanisms interact to reflect the system value of technologies, and we found that they didn't really work that well. So there were some technologies which might have, from a system point of view, be highly valuable, but not actually being rewarded that well in the marketplace or through the mechanisms that give rise to revenue for investors. So there's that set of issues, and then particularly around flexibility. So we've seen a lot of huge growth in renewables, obviously, but flexibility kind of failing to keep pace with that, and a concern from many of the innovators and innovative new companies in the marketplace that there wasn't really the kind of price signals, the market signals to reward them for bringing flexibility onto the system. So, government being very concerned about that, but actually in the marketplace not really having the right kind of signals to reward people for doing that. So those are the sort of issues that we were looking at exploring in the Rethinking Electricity Markets work that we've done.
That's very interesting. And in a world where you're trying to understand technology and understand how different forms of technology might develop, what's out there, what's possible, then I could also guess that it's a changing picture. Things are changing so rapidly these days. So, Sarah, how do you incorporate that in the thinking in terms of this area?
Well, yeah, that's our starting point, really, and thinking about how the future might unfold. I mean, certainly with our cost optimizing modeling that we do at the Energy Systems Catapult, it's really clear that in any pathway to net zero, there'll be a high share of variable renewables. And at the same time, a significant development of smaller scale decentralized resources connected at low voltages or behind the meter. And we also expect, increasingly a much larger presence of potentially controllable resources across different appliances or devices, electric heating, electric vehicles, domestic generation and storage, and so on. And at the same time, we will lose the conventional, large-scale conventional transmission connected generation that provides certain services like inertia that we've been taking for granted. So there will be, new risks and with it a lot of opportunities. But it's crucial, from our perspective, to minimize total systems costs as we transition to net zero while we maintain system reliability. And the key goal, of any policy framework is to do that. And to do that, you need much more power system flexibility, including on the demand side, because this is key to keeping those costs down. So with all this fast-moving technological change, we want innovation to thrive, and we don't want to constrain it. And it's clear with our work with A3 that it was really important. It's really important to get those market prices right. And to evolve the policy framework in a way that is aligned with that, so it doesn't distort price signals, which we feel is happening at the moment. So where we have ended up really is looking at a policy framework that is downstream. At the moment, it's upstream, and government determines the inputs. So this is quite hampering for innovation, and as I said, the policies are distorting. But with a decentralized policy framework, you would apply obligations on the market actors that actually drive markets, and that's the retailers and consumers. And these important market outcomes really relate to carbon reduction and reliability. So this is, where we got to. It's about evolving the policy framework in a way that would support innovation and support developing the system and the markets constructively.
So you need a policy framework that can allow innovation, adaptation, and for it not to be so top down and rigid.
Right.
In order to allow that to happen, because we've seen sometimes examples of people investing in batteries, and they've been investing in batteries on the basis of today's regulations for networks, and we might point out to them that it's unlikely some of those things that we've seen in the past are going to last for forever or for that much longer. So I think it's always really important to understand how that policy and regulation is going to adapt into the future. So that's very interesting to think of that more sort of downstream world and what that might look like. So perhaps, Gareth, we can bring you in then and ask you what's your view in terms of electricity to market design then? What are the strategic choices we've got there?
Thanks, Matt. That's a good question. I think there's many strategic choices out there. I think one of the key ones that I'd want to focus on, which picks up on what George and Sarah have been saying, is really how should the market design be set up so that we're actually properly signaling the value of flexibility going forward. So we've already heard that the net zero electricity system will have some very different characteristics to the system of today. On the one hand, we'll have a generation mix that is less predictable and flexible and probably much more distributed across the voltage levels of the network. And on the other hand, we'll have a demand side, which through a combination of sector coupling and the rapid evolution of smart systems and digitalization, really has the potential to have material opportunities for providing demand side flexibility. But we need a market design that not only can deliver the millions of investment that's required for the transition, but ensures it's the right type of resource in the right locations to ensure we're able to minimize the energy system cost and to maintain the sort of reliability and security on an operational level as well. And for us, I think this means we need a market framework that provides more accurate, dynamic, short-term signals so that we can get an efficient real-term operation and with a much stronger locational aspect to it as well.
Thanks very much. George, do you have anything to add on that point?
It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Gareth has talked about there. We are facing a very different future, much more decentralized, much more flexible kind of electricity system, much more interactions, and not just kind of flows from a centralized generation outwards. So those locational and real-time signals are really important. The other thing I'd add, I suppose, is around as we go deeper into decarbonisation, then getting the decarbonisation driver properly reflected into the market signals is really key. And we've kind of used various clunky mechanisms to date to do that. We've had, obviously the carbon price emissions trading, and then in the UK we've had the carbon price support on top of that, and then we've had CFDs coming in supporting low carbon generation as well. But if we can kind of sort the way in which the imperative to decarbonize is get that properly sorted out in market signals, and that would be a huge step forwards, not only for the electricity system but for the wider energy system, because zero carbon electricity is going to play such a central role in decarbonizing energy demands in heat and in transport in the future, in the 20s and 2020s, 2030s, 2040s. So really getting the right mix and the right role for zero carbon electricity is really important going forward.
So perhaps, Sarah, back to you. In terms of making all this happen, do you see there being many challenges for the implementation of getting there?
I think, yeah, undoubtedly there are challenges, but one of the most significant, I think, is time. You need a lot of time to develop reforms, to phase them in, evolve them, and so on, especially if primary legislation is needed. So, and at the same time, the market participants, they have to adapt. So there's a high risk, I think, that we'll be caught on the back foot, given the ambition of net zero and the fast pace of technological change, given it takes so much time to make regulatory change and adapt markets and so on. So I think it's necessary to be really ambitious and to have a clear vision of where we need to get to and the ultimate outcomes that we need to achieve. And this is, incorporated in our overarching policy framework and market design that we developed with AFRY. And it's we've come to the conclusion it's quite clear we need to start now to evolve that policy framework. And it's important to think about the phasing of change. So, for example, in theory, when we think about replacing the centralized capacity market, we develop proposals that are decentralized. You could jump from the centralized capacity market that we have today to something much more minimalist, like strategic reserves that would only be used if the market fails to clear. But the government probably wants more assurance that capacity will be available in times of scarcity, and perhaps market participants want time to adapt. So with this decentralized approach that we developed with AFRY, you could start off with a strong role for government, as it could set the capacity requirement. But over time, as the market develops and as demand side flexibility grows, the retailers could eventually take much more responsibility, including for determining the resource requirement to achieve the reliability that they think is necessary. And the government could reduce its role, and also the system operator as well would reduce its role.
So I wonder, Gareth, if there are things we could also learn from other markets when we're thinking about this area. Did you pick up on anything during the work that was applicable? And then I think after that, perhaps George, you could tell us a little bit about the market design concept itself that Energy Systems Catapult is promoting.
So yes, we can definitely learn from the other markets, and in particular, a lot of our collaboration that we've done with the Catapult has actually been around identifying alternative market design options through case studies. So, for example, if we are looking at more granular locational signals, we've looked at zonal markets like the Nord Pool market to understand how they address some of the risks inherent in that type of system, to do with changing or redefinition of the pricing zones or the congestion cost exposure that the market participants might face. And then on the other side, when we're considering aspects like more decentralized options for delivering supply security, we've seen examples such as the French supplier obligation. We put the retailer in charge of the decision on how to manage its portfolio of generation contracts and of demand to actually meet the sort of centralized requirement for supply. So there's definitely a lot we can learn from how other markets have looked at these issues and are dealing with them at the moment. But obviously we still need to realize that the GB itself has some unique characteristics, and we are very much going into a system that is very different than any market we have at the moment.
Absolutely, and it's a really, really important point for us in our sort of regulation, policy, market design practice that we never come with a one size fits all solution. The so many local aspects that one has to consider in terms of the resources that are available. If you're a hydro system or a heavily thermal system, or if you're what your objectives ultimately are. It really has to start from first principles in every country, in every location, and every region. So then, George, we've talked a lot really around the subject. Can you pull it together for us and tell us, sort of in essence, what is the market design concept that you're promoting?
Okay. I think we all know the UK is quite a consumer-driven economy. So our concept that we're developing and promoting in the UK concept is very consumer-centric. So developing the idea of energy service providers or retailers who are acting on behalf of consumers and doing a lot of the upstream contracting and optimization of energy resources to deliver attractive services to consumers. And that's really lies at the heart of our vision. But in order to kind of bring about the market conditions to enable that to happen, you have to have the right kind of pricing framework sitting around that. So the players in the market need to be facing much more accurate price signals that are reflective of the underlying physics of the decentralized variegated electricity system, that zero carbon electricity system that we're developing now. So much more granular price signals by time and location. So that provides those energy service providers with the business case, if you like, the incentives, the price signals to respond to, so that they can contract and optimize in delivering the service offering to consumers. The other thing you need to get right around that then is the overarching policy framework, the obligations that are placed on the market participants. And so there's two elements to that, really: the sort of system-wide obligations that we think need to be met and expressed in as an outcome is around decarbonisation. So that could be in the form of a carbon intensity obligation across a retailer's portfolio of supply, and then a reliability obligation. So which relates to the reliability of the service offering to consumers. So that's the broad overall concept of the kind of market design that we think would work in this future that we're moving towards, and would really enable markets and innovation and new products and services and digitization to really come together and optimize all of these various zero carbon energy resources, plus the flexibility that you need to complement them to deliver those attractive energy services to consumers. And that's really the concept that we're working with. It's going to take a while to get there, but that's the sort of vision of the direction of travel.
Thank you. And you know, I suppose I have to ask: does it go far enough, the concept, to deliver what we need? What do you think?
Well, we would argue that what we're suggesting is pretty ambitious. It's a long way from where we are at the minute, where you know the market is kind of heavily, you know, there's a lot of interventions that don't really match up very well in and a kind of complex mix of policies at the minute. So it's a kind of radical move from that. You know, and it's a change in emphasis, if you like, to this idea of decentralized markets with outcome-based obligations. So the way we've kind of tested as to whether we think it goes far enough is to look at some of the challenges that we think we face, that any new market concept or market design needs to address. So things like, you know, is it capable of delivering enough zero carbon resource investment, because we're going to need a lot of that? Is it able to integrate the various different energy resources into the system adequately? So those are the kind of challenges that we feel need to be addressed, and we think this concept is an ambitious direction to take policy. It will take some time to get there, but it's fit for a sort of zero carbon future, which, you know, in the electricity system, we're going to have to get pretty close to zero carbon in the 2030s. So it's not actually that far away.
Thank you. And I think it's so important for everyone that there is a good vision out there of where we're headed to, because Sarah, perhaps you can continue that on, because the key for a lot of our clients will be, what does this mean for market participants, future business models, this new concept?
Yeah, I mean, as George was explaining, you know, it's really about retail innovation, and we would imagine that, you know, in the retail sector, that by setting up the right kind of policy framework, you'd be motivating the market participants to be highly innovative in extracting value upstream and then delivering really attractive consumer propositions in the form of different experience-based services. And at the moment in the retail sector, there are a lot of restrictive rules, particularly the supplier hub concept, you know, whereby you know the consumers are interfacing with just a single supplier. And at the moment, you know, there's a lot of regulatory efforts going on to try and unlock that, and we think that's absolutely right. But what we need to do is to set a boundary around, you know, the retail sector that is linked to delivering outcomes, so we guarantee that these outcomes in terms of carbon reduction and reliability are secured. And so if we do that right, and we set the policy framework up like this, that it's outcome based and not input based, then we should, in theory, be able to, and in practice, be able to enable any kind of business models to develop. And it's important that you know, any restrictions or market barriers are lifted. And then we would expect to see quite a lot of change. Alongside the decentralized contracting, reorganization of supply chains, efficiencies being squeezed out of supply chains, and consumers, you know, benefiting from a wider variety of consumer propositions. In our other thought leadership work in other areas, one of the proposals is to apply a carbon performance obligation on asset building owners, and this would incentivize, you know, retailers to perhaps bundle different energy resources, including energy efficiency and demand reduction, for those people that own buildings, and to deliver sort of blended, resource optimization and project management on behalf of consumers and so on. So you're really creating a framework where you can drive optimization. And with that, obviously, lots of decentralized contracting and perhaps reorganization of supply chain. So yes, lots of change potentially.
Yeah, and a lot of opportunity, I think, for, there are a lot of new entrants these days coming into the market with, I think they would welcome a lot of these opportunities to get more heavily involved, especially down at that consumer level. So in terms of key takeaways from the work overall, do you have any for us?
A couple of things. I think we may see some very, very different types of contractual relationships across the value chain in the future with these new business models coming in. And importantly, I think it's who you're going to be contracting with. It may not be that the sort of the market participants in the current energy system are those that are on their own in the near future. Whether that's looking at the likes of the Amazons or the Microsofts or the Googles, or whether it's looking at your small community energy systems, you will maybe get a fairly significantly different mix of players in the market.
Yeah, and I think in essence, it's about getting the market signals right and ensuring that policy framework delivers the outcomes required. By placing the obligations on the market actors that can actually drive the markets. We are looking at a market-led approach and not market-based policy so much. We are trying to achieve net zero, and it means scaling right across the economy. Without this shift in policy approach from upstream to downstream, there's essentially a significant risk that we will really hamper and prevent a lot of innovation. And consumer engagement is something we just cannot take for granted. So it's really important that future market design and the policy framework, gets that right and gives it the best chance that's possible.
So, George, what's next then from Energy System Catapult? How do we get there? How do we make it happen? What's next from you?
Well, we're continuing to work in this area. There'll be some deeper dives on particular themes. We're publishing a report. We've been talking to a lot of stakeholders about these ideas. We've got the opportunities potentially with an energy white paper, much delayed, but hopefully we're going to see one of those before long, and that will open up space, I think, to take forwards some of these issues and start making some progress. We can't move immediately from where we are now, where we're heavily reliant on instruments like CFDs and capacity market to drive investment in new resources of one kind or another. But we need to start reforming those mechanisms and pulling back and creating the right kind of market signals, market environment. So we're looking to play our part by doing some thought leadership, by working with innovators, by clarifying what the possibilities are, helping them to address some of the barriers and to show what the possibilities from innovative approaches could be.
And finally, perhaps, actually, Gareth, do you have anything to add on that?
There was a challenge. What's been set out is very clearly the type of framework that will encourage the investment that's required for that net zero transition, will encourage the innovation that underpins the developments, and also the integration that we want to get from the retail sector into this. But it's right. One of the things that constrains how quickly you can set that framework up is history and where we are at the moment, and you have to have a sort of a good plan for how you will transition from the business as usual at the moment towards these changes. And at the moment, areas around sharper locational signals, the interfaces between our transmission and distribution networks, as well as some of the options for enabling the innovative retail consumer models. These all need further pushing. I think the work that's been done by the Catapult is a good starting point for that.
Thank you. And finally, to you, George, and then perhaps Gareth can chip in as well. How was the collaboration between Catapult and AFRY?
Yeah, it was very enjoyable, Matt. Very good to work with the AFRY team, with Simon and Gareth on these issues. I think the thing that we particularly valued was the obvious expertise and knowledge that AFRY bring to this kind of work. Obviously, you guys have been involved in various markets around the world, so enabling us to understand some of the lessons that we could draw from experience elsewhere, helping us work through the issues collaboratively and get our heads around the issues, because this is really, really challenging stuff. So that was great as well. I feel like you helped us come up with a vision that is our vision, but helped us to get there and to understand what's possible for it to be as well informed as we can make it by evidence and analysis. That was great. And I really like that you write in English as well for consultants. So some of these issues are very complex, but I find that AFRY is very good at turning some of these issues into kind of understandable reports and documents. So that's very helpful too.
Thanks for those kind words, George. I think from our side of it as well, over the several pieces of work we've done over the last few years, we've always found the interaction, the collaboration to be really useful, and also and challenging, I would say, as well. Actually, what we really appreciate is the fact that within the Catapult, there's a diverse set of perspectives that are brought together because of the nature of the people that you've got working there, sort of, as well as sort of the policy and regulatory aspects. You've got the people who are actually involved in the consumer behavioural insights. You've got the sort of the technical experts and the real sort of innovators and the modelers. And I think getting that sort of challenge about how you can deliver some of these visions from those very different sets of perspectives is really helpful, actually, because otherwise you can come at these from a very narrow set of views and perspectives. And so it's great that we've been able to sort of contribute our experience to the Catapult, but also I think the Catapult sort of wide insights have helped firm up some of our ideas as to where some of the future market design elements should be going.
So thank you very much to George, to Sarah from the Catapult, and to Gareth from our Oxford office. And thank you for listening. I hope you're finding these podcasts interesting. I think it's a fascinating subject. Please remember to subscribe through your usual podcast providers, and I look forward to talking with you in the future. Bye-bye.